The research ship hung in orbit like a silver needle against the darkness. Below it, the dead planet turned slowly, its surface covered in rust-colored dust that had not moved in millions of years. On the surface stood the monument, tall and silent, waiting. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face close to the viewing window and stared down at the structure. Even from orbit, she could see how massive it was. The monument rose 400 meters into the thin atmosphere, a spike of dark crystal that caught the light of the distant sun and threw it back in strange colors. Beautiful, is it not? The voice came from behind her. Sarah turned to see Krishna, her Vex colleague, approaching on 6 legs. The alien's body was covered in smooth gray plates and its 3 eyes blinked in sequence. We have studied 47 such monuments across the galaxy. All identical, all silent, Sarah nodded. She had read the reports during her long journey here. The monuments were older than any living civilization. They belonged to the architects, a species that had vanished long before the Vex or the Thorum or any of the current galactic races had even crawled out of their oceans. How long have you been trying to activate them? Sarah asked. Krishna made a sound like rocks grinding together, which Sarah had learned was the Vex equivalent of a sigh. 300 cycles. We have tried everything. Energy fields, electromagnetic pulses, quantum entanglement, even simple physical contact. The monuments do not respond. They simply stand there, covered in symbols we cannot read, keeping secrets we cannot access. The shuttle ride down to the surface took an hour. Sarah sat strapped into her seat, watching through the small window as the planet grew larger. Beside her sat Torvik, a Thorum warrior who served as the expedition's security chief. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with forearms and skin that looked like polished stone. You are the first human to join our research, Torvik said, his voice rumbling deep in his chest. Why did the council approve your request? Sarah smiled. Because I'm a linguist. I study how beings communicate. The council thinks maybe I can find a pattern in the symbols that others missed. Torvik grunted. Many have tried. All have failed. The architects left nothing but these monuments and questions. The landing site was a flat area about 1 kilometer from the monument. As Sarah stepped off the shuttle, her boots crunched on the ancient dust. The air was thin but breathable, kept that way by atmospheric processors the research team had installed. She could see the monument in the distance, dark against the orange sky. The research camp was a collection of white domes connected by sealed corridors. Inside, Sarah met the rest of the team. There were 12 researchers in total, representing 6 different species. She was the only human. Some of them welcomed her warmly. Others seemed skeptical that she could succeed where so many had failed. The next morning, Sarah made her first trip to the monument itself. She rode in a ground vehicle with Krishna and 2 other researchers. As they got closer, the true size of the structure became clear. It was enormous, wider at the base than any building Sarah had ever seen. The surface was smooth and dark, covered completely in symbols that seemed to flow into each other like water frozen in time. What did the symbols mean? Sarah asked. We do not know, Krishna replied. We have identified patterns, repetitions, what might be grammar or syntax. But we cannot translate them. We do not know what sounds they represent, if any. We do not even know if they are writing in the way we understand it. Sarah got out of the vehicle and walked up to the monument. She placed her hand against the surface. It was cold and perfectly smooth. She could feel a faint vibration, so subtle she almost thought she imagined it. For the next 3 weeks, Sarah worked. She photographed every symbol, every pattern. She created databases looking for repetition and structure. She compared the symbols to known writing systems from 100 different worlds. She worked long hours, often forgetting to eat or sleep. The other researchers left her alone, doubtful that she would find anything new. They had their own projects, their own theories. The camp settled into a routine. One evening, Sarah was alone at the monument. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and red. She stood close to the surface, studying a particularly complex section of symbols. She was tired. Her eyes hurt from staring at patterns all day. Without thinking, she began to hum. It was an old song her mother used to sing, a simple melody that brought comfort. She hummed while she worked, her eyes tracing the symbols, her mind trying to find meaning in the shapes. The monument moved. It was so slight that at first Sarah thought she had imagined it. But then she felt it again, a vibration that traveled up through her hand where it rested against the surface. She stopped humming immediately, and the vibration stopped too. Her heart began to race. Slowly, carefully, she hummed the same melody again. The vibration returned, stronger this time. She could see it now. The faintest glow appearing in some of the symbols, pulsing in time with her humming. Sarah pulled her hand back, breathing hard. She looked around, but she was alone. The sun had set completely now, and the only light came from the lamps on her vehicle and the strange new glow from the monument itself. She needed to tell the others. She needed to document this, but first she needed to understand what had just happened. She took a deep breath and hummed again, louder this time, more confident. The monument responded immediately. The vibration grew stronger and more symbols began to glow. The light was soft like moonlight, blue-white and steady. Sarah changed the pitch of her humming, going higher. The glow changed color slightly, shifting toward green. She went lower, and the color shifted toward red. She was controlling it somehow with her voice. She stopped and the monument went dark again, returning to its silent state. Sarah ran back to the vehicle, her mind racing. She grabbed her communication device and called Krishna. "I need you to come to the monument," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Right now. I think I found something." "It is late," Krishna replied. "Can it wait until morning?" "No," Sarah said. "I made it respond. I made the monument respond to me." There was a long pause on the other end. Then Krishna said, "We will be there in 10 minutes." Sarah stood in front of the monument waiting. The night was cold and she wrapped her arms around herself. Above her, stars filled the sky, more stars than she had ever seen from Earth. Somewhere among them were the worlds where the other monuments stood, all waiting, all silent, until now. The lights of the approaching vehicles appeared in the distance. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to show them what she had discovered. She had no idea that this moment would change everything, that the simple act of humming would unlock a mystery millions of years old and reveal a truth that would shake the entire galaxy. The entire research team stood in a circle around Sarah, watching her with expressions that ranged from excitement to deep skepticism. Krishna had brought everyone, waking them from sleep with the news that something impossible had happened. "Show us," Krishna said quietly. Sarah felt nervous with so many eyes on her. She stepped forward and placed her hand on the monument. Then she began to hum the same melody as before. Nothing happened. She heard someone behind her make a disappointed sound. She tried again, humming louder, but still the monument remained dark and silent. Sweat began to form on her forehead despite the cold night air. "Perhaps you were mistaken," said Vortan, one of the Kyren researchers. His species communicated through patterns of light that flickered across their crystalline bodies. "Perhaps it was simply a reflection or a trick of the fading light." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I know what I saw. I felt it." She tried a third time, changing the melody slightly, searching for the right pattern. Still nothing. Then she remembered something. When it had happened before, she had been relaxed, not thinking about it. She had been humming without intention, just making sound while she worked. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself relax. She thought about her mother, about home, about the feeling of being safe and comfortable. She began to hum again, not trying to make it happen, just letting the sound come naturally. The monument woke up. Gasps echoed around the circle as symbols began to glow along the surface. The vibration was stronger now, strong enough that everyone could feel it through the ground beneath their feet. The light pulsed in time with Sarah's humming, creating patterns that flowed across the monument like water. "By the void," Krishna whispered. "It is real." Sarah stopped humming and the light faded. She opened her eyes to find everyone staring at her with amazement. For a moment, no one spoke. Then everyone started talking at once, asking questions, offering theories, demanding explanations. Over the next several days, the camp became a place of frantic activity. Sarah worked with the team to document everything. She hummed different melodies, different pitches, different rhythms. Each produced a slightly different response from the monument. Some patterns made the light brighter. Others changed its color. Some made new symbols glow that had never shown light before. But they still could not make the monument do more than glow. It was responding, yes, but it was not truly active. It was like knocking on a door and hearing movement inside, but the door remained locked. "The symbols are not just decoration," Sarah explained during one of the team meetings. "They are instructions. Or maybe they are a key. We need to figure out what they are telling us to do. Krishna worked with Sarah to analyze the patterns. The Vex had spent decades studying these symbols, and now with the monument responding, new details became visible. When certain sections glowed, they could see layers of meaning they had missed before. "Look at this," Krishna said, pointing to a cluster of symbols that pulsed brighter than others when Sarah hummed a specific melody. These symbols appear to represent frequency, and these ones might indicate duration or rhythm, like musical notation, Sarah said, understanding dawning. "They are not words. They are sounds." The architects wrote down sounds. This changed everything. Sarah began to approach the symbols as if they were sheet music from an alien composer. She identified what might be high notes and low notes, long sounds and short sounds. She started to build a vocabulary of sounds based on the monument's responses. But there was a problem. When Sarah tried to produce the more complex sound patterns indicated by the symbols, nothing happened. The monument responded to simple humming, but it did not fully activate. "I think I am missing something," Sarah told Krishna one evening. They sat in the research dome, drinking the hot, bitter liquid that Vex considered a delicacy. Sarah found it terrible, but drank it anyway to be polite. "The monument responds to my voice, but not to the voices of any other species." "Why?" "We do not use voices the way you do," Krishna explained. "My people communicate through vibrations in our exoskeletons. The Thorum use subsonic rumbles that you cannot even hear. The Chiron use light. The Zixan use chemical signals. None of the current spacefaring species use vocal cords for complex communication." "But the architects did," Sarah said slowly. "That is what the monument is waiting for. It needs someone who can speak the way the architects spoke." The next day, Sarah asked Torvik to bring up the holographic records from the monument's partial activation. When she had first made it respond weeks ago, the monument had projected brief flashes of images. They had been too quick and fragmentary to make sense of at the time, but they had been recorded. Sarah played them back slowly, frame by frame. The images showed figures, tall and slender, with 2 legs and 2 arms. They had heads and faces, and they had mouths that moved while they gestured to each other. "They look like humans," Torvik said, his voice filled with confusion. "How is this possible? The architects existed millions of years before humans evolved." Sarah stared at the images. The architects were not exactly human. She could see differences in their proportions, in the structure of their faces. But they were remarkably similar. More similar than they should be. "We need to study their biology," Sarah said. "We need to understand how they produce sound." The team worked together to enhance the images, extracting every detail they could. What they found was disturbing. The architects had vocal structures almost identical to human vocal cords. They had tongues, throats, mouths shaped for creating complex sounds. They were built to speak in a way that was nearly identical to humans. "This cannot be coincidence," Vortan said during the meeting where they shared these findings. "Either this is the most extreme case of convergent evolution ever documented, or there is another explanation." "What other explanation could there be?" Torvik asked. No one had an answer. The implications were too large, too strange to process easily. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Why would beings from millions of years ago look and sound like humans? But the mystery would have to wait. The immediate problem was that even knowing the architects used vocal communication, Sarah still could not activate the monument fully. She tried reproducing the sound patterns indicated by the symbols, but something was missing. Krishna suggested they analyze Sarah's voice in detail. Using advanced equipment, they mapped every aspect of how she produced sound. They measured the vibrations of her vocal cords, the shape of her mouth, the way air moved through her throat. What they discovered was surprising. Humans had an unusually wide vocal range compared to most species. Sarah could produce sounds from deep bass notes to high whistles, could shift between pitches rapidly, could layer multiple tones at once through techniques like throat singing. Her voice was an incredibly flexible instrument. The other species in the galaxy do not have this flexibility, Krishna explained. We each have our own methods of communication, specialized for our needs. But humans, your voices can do many things. You can make many sounds that others cannot. Maybe that is why the monument responds to me, Sarah said. Maybe the architects had voices like mine. Maybe they could make all these different sounds too. She spent days practicing learning to control her voice in new ways. She learned techniques from Earth's various cultures. Throat singing from Mongolia, overtone singing from Tibet, the complex tonal languages of Africa and Asia. She pushed her voice to its limits, discovering sounds she did not know she could make. And slowly, symbol by symbol, she began to decode the monument's message. She learned that certain phrases required rapid pitch changes that moved up and down in specific patterns. Others required her to sustain multiple tones at once. Some needed emotional resonance, sounds that carried feeling as well as frequency. It was not a language in the traditional sense. It was something more like music, or perhaps something between music and speech. It was beautiful and complex and unlike anything Sarah had ever encountered. One evening, as she practiced a particularly difficult phrase, the monument responded more strongly than ever before. New sections lit up sections that had never shown light. A low hum filled the air, coming from deep within the structure. Sarah stopped, breathing hard from the effort. She looked at Krishna and saw her own excitement reflected in the alien's 3 eyes. "I think I am close," Sarah said. "I think I am very close to opening it." The message reached Earth 3 weeks later, traveling through the network of quantum relays that connected the human colonies. When it arrived at the Galactic Council headquarters, it caused immediate chaos. Sarah knew none of this at first. She was too busy working with the monument, too focused on her research to pay attention to the political storms gathering in distant places. But the storm was coming for her whether she knew it or not. Krishna was the one who told her. The Vex entered Sarah's quarters early one morning, moving with unusual speed and agitation. "There is trouble," Krishna said without greeting. "The council has called an emergency session. They are discussing the monuments and what your discovery means." Sarah sat up in her bed, confused and still half asleep. "What do you mean? Why would they discuss it now? We have not even fully activated the monument yet." "That is precisely why," Krishna replied. "Several council members are concerned about what might happen when you do. They are concerned about what it means that only humans can access architect technology." Sarah felt suddenly cold. She had been so focused on the puzzle of the monument that she had not thought about the larger implications. But now, with Krishna's worried expression, she began to understand. "They think this gives humans an unfair advantage," she said slowly. "Some do. The Thorum delegation is particularly vocal. Torvik tells me they believe the monuments may contain weapons or technology that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. If only humans can access them, if all 47 monuments respond only to human voices, then humans would control the greatest treasure trove of ancient technology ever discovered." Sarah got dressed quickly and followed Krishna to the command dome. Inside, the rest of the team was gathered around a holographic display showing the council session. The display showed dozens of representatives from various species, all talking at once, their voices overlapping in multiple languages that the translation systems struggled to keep up with. "This is unprecedented," said Ambassador Taven, a tall Chiron whose body flickered with agitated patterns of red light. "We have worked for centuries to unlock the architect secrets. Now you tell us that all our efforts were pointless because we do not have the correct biology? This seems convenient for the humans, does it not?" A human representative, Ambassador Williams, stood to respond. She was an older woman with gray hair and a calm demeanor that Sarah immediately envied. "The council is overreacting. Dr. Chen has made a breakthrough in understanding how the monuments function. This should be celebrated, not feared. We are not claiming ownership of the monuments. We are simply offering our assistance in unlocking them. Assistance that only your species can provide," countered Vortek, a Thorum general whose forearms gestured emphatically. "This creates a monopoly. If the monuments contain advanced weapons, advanced ships, advanced anything, humans would be the only ones who could access them. The rest of us would be dependent on your goodwill." The debate raged on for hours. Sarah watched, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. She had not wanted this. She had just wanted to solve the puzzle, to understand the mystery. Now she was at the center of a political crisis that threatened to divide the entire galactic community. Krishna placed a gentle claw on Sarah's shoulder. "This is not your fault," the Vex said quietly. "You only did what any good researcher would do. The politics are not your concern." But Sarah knew that was not entirely true. Whether she wanted it or not, her discovery had consequences. The question was what to do about them. The council eventually reached a compromise. The research could continue, but under strict supervision. Representatives from multiple species would oversee Sarah's work. Any technology recovered from the monuments would be shared equally among all council members. And most importantly, Sarah would have to document exactly how she activated the monuments so that the process could be replicated or adapted by other species if possible. Sarah agreed to all of this. She had no interest in keeping secrets or giving humans an advantage. She just wanted to understand. The work continued, but now with many more eyes watching. The research camp swelled with new arrivals, observers and overseers sent by their governments to make sure nothing was hidden. Sarah found it difficult to work with so many people looking over her shoulder, but she persisted. She and Krishna spent long hours analyzing the biological data they had collected. They compared the architect physiology to human physiology in minute detail. What they found was both fascinating and deeply strange. The similarities were not superficial. The architects had the same basic vocal structure as humans, yes, but it went deeper than that. They had similar respiratory systems, similar throat geometry, even similar tongue musculature. It was as if they had been designed to make the same kinds of sounds. This level of similarity is impossible through natural evolution, Krishna said, studying the data with growing confusion. Your species and the architects evolved on different worlds millions of years apart. There is no way you should be this similar. Sarah had been thinking the same thing. There was only one explanation that made sense, and it was an explanation that seemed impossible. What if we did not evolve separately? She asked quietly. Krishna's 3 eyes focused on her intently. What do you mean? What if the architects are related to humans somehow? What if they came to Earth long ago, millions of years in the past, and left something behind? What if they seeded life on Earth or influenced human evolution somehow? The Vex was silent for a long moment. Then Krishna said, that would explain the biological similarities. But it raises so many more questions. Why would they do this? Why would they seed a world with life and then leave? And if they did, why build monuments that only their distant descendants could open? These were questions Sarah could not answer. Not yet. But she was beginning to form a theory, one that was both wonderful and sad. Maybe they knew they were dying out, she said softly. Maybe they wanted to leave a legacy, something that would survive them. So they planted the seeds of life on promising worlds, hoping that someday, millions of years later, one of those seeded species would evolve intelligence and find the monuments. The monuments are not just repositories of knowledge. They are messages. Messages from parents to children who would not be born for millions of years. Krishna made a sound like wind whistling through stone. That is a beautiful theory, but it is also very sad. To know you are dying, to have no hope of survival, and to reach out across such vast time hoping someone will hear you. The loneliness of it is overwhelming. Sarah nodded, feeling tears form in her eyes. She wiped them away quickly, not wanting the observers to see. But she felt it too. That sense of vast loneliness, of a desperate hope cast across millions of years. She threw herself back into her work with renewed determination. If the architects had left a message for humanity, for their distant children, then she was going to hear it. She owed them that much. Over the following weeks, Sarah continued to refine her technique. She practiced the complex vocal patterns required, training her voice to do things she had never thought possible. She learned to produce multiple tones at once, to shift rapidly between different pitches, to add emotional resonance to her sounds in ways that felt almost instinctive. And slowly, piece by piece, she decoded more of the monument's message. She learned phrases that made different sections activate. She discovered harmonics that caused the monument to project clearer holograms. She found rhythms that seemed to unlock deeper levels of response. The other species watched with a mixture of awe and envy. They could see her making progress, but they could not replicate what she did. Some tried, using technological aids to produce the required frequencies, but the monument did not respond to mechanical sounds the same way it responded to Sarah's voice. There was something about the organic quality of human speech, about the subtle variations and emotional content that the monument needed. One evening, Sarah stood before the monument as the sun set. She had been working for nearly 3 months now, and she felt she was finally ready. She had decoded what she believed was the primary activation sequence, a long and complex phrase that required her to use every technique she had learned. Krishna stood beside her, along with Torvik and a dozen other researchers and observers. They all watched in silence as Sarah prepared herself. She took a deep breath, centered herself, and began to speak. It was not quite speech and not quite song, but something in between. Her voice rose and fell, layered itself into harmonics, carried emotion and meaning and frequency all woven together in a pattern that felt both alien and somehow deeply familiar. The monument responded immediately. Light blazed from every symbol, bright enough to hurt the eyes. The ground shook with a deep vibration that resonated in their chests. The air hummed with energy, and then slowly the monument opened. Not physically, but dimensionally. Space around it began to warp and shimmer. A doorway appeared in the air, a portal leading somewhere else, somewhere filled with soft blue light. Sarah stopped speaking, breathing hard from the effort. She stared at the portal, at the invitation it represented. "I think," she said quietly, "we just opened the door." The portal hung in the air like a tear in reality, pulsing with soft blue light that cast strange shadows across the assembled researchers. No one moved. No one spoke. They all simply stared at the impossible thing Sarah had created with her voice. Finally, Torvik broke the silence. "What is it?" the Thorum asked, his deep voice uncertain. "A connection," Krishna said, moving closer with careful steps. The Vex extended sensors toward the portal, recording readings. "It appears to be a stable wormhole, but unlike any we have seen before. It is not connecting 2 points in normal space. It is connecting to somewhere else, somewhere outside normal dimensions." Sarah took a step toward the portal. She could feel something calling to her from beyond it. A gentle pull that was not quite physical. It felt like recognition, like coming home after a long journey. "I think it wants me to enter," she said. Immediately, several voices rose in protest. It was too dangerous, they said. Unknown technology, unknown destination, too many risks. But Sarah barely heard them. The pull was stronger now, and with it came a feeling of urgency. The portal would not stay open forever. Whatever the architects wanted to show her, she needed to see it now. "I am going in," Sarah said firmly. "You can follow me or not, but I am going." Krishna moved to stand beside her. "Then I am coming with you. Someone needs to document this scientifically." Torvik sighed and checked his weapons. "And someone needs to keep you both safe." "I am coming too." The three of them approached the portal together. Sarah reached out and touched the surface. It felt like touching water, cool and yielding. She took a breath and stepped through. The sensation was indescribable. For a moment she was nowhere and everywhere at once. Then reality reassembled itself and she was standing in a vast chamber filled with light. The chamber was enormous, stretching away in all directions further than she could see. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all made of the same dark crystal as the monument, but here they glowed from within, creating a soft illumination that had no single source. And floating in the air all around them were images, millions of images, each one showing a different scene from a different time. Krishna and Torvik emerged from the portal behind her, both making sounds of amazement. The portal closed behind them with a soft whisper of displaced air. "Where are we?" Torvik asked, turning slowly to take it all in. "Inside the monument, I think," Sarah said, "or maybe connected to all the monuments simultaneously. This is their archive. This is what they wanted to preserve." As if responding to her words, the images began to move. They flowed through the air toward the three visitors, organizing themselves into a coherent narrative. Sarah watched as the story of the architects unfolded before her eyes. She saw their world, a beautiful planet with blue oceans and green continents. She saw their cities, tall and graceful, built in harmony with nature. She saw the architects themselves, billions of them, living and working and creating. They looked so human, so heartbreakingly familiar. She saw their achievements, the art they created, the music they made, the science they developed. They had reached for the stars and claimed them, building an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. They had been magnificent. But then something changed. The images showed the architects becoming worried, holding meetings, arguing amongst themselves. Sarah could not hear their voices, but she could see the fear in their faces. "What happened to them?" Krishna asked quietly. The images showed the answer. A plague, or perhaps a genetic degradation, something in their very biology that began to fail. The architects tried everything to save themselves. They built medical facilities, developed treatments, even tried to alter their own genetics. Nothing worked. Whatever was killing them was fundamental to who they were, woven into their DNA so deeply that fixing it would mean becoming something else entirely. Sarah felt tears running down her face as she watched the architects realize they were doomed. She saw their despair, their grief, their acceptance. But she also saw their determination. If they could not save themselves, they would save their legacy. The images showed the architects beginning a massive project. They sent ships to distant worlds, primitive worlds with simple life. On those worlds they planted something. Seeds, but not the seeds of plants. Seeds of potential. Genetic material carefully designed to guide evolution, to nudge it in specific directions over millions of years. They seeded Earth, Sarah whispered. They seeded my world. The images confirmed it. She saw an architect ship arriving at a young Earth, saw them descending to the surface of an ocean, saw them releasing microscopic packages into the water. She saw those packages integrating with the primitive life already there, becoming part of it, guiding it forward along a path the architects had designed. They seeded other worlds too, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each one chosen for its potential, each one given the gift of directed evolution. The architects were creating children, descendants who would carry on after they were gone. But they did not stop there. The images showed them building the monuments, one on each of the worlds they had seeded. The monuments were keys, designed to respond only to the voices of the species that would evolve from those seeds. They were also archives, containing the sum total of architect knowledge and achievement. They were gifts from dying parents to children not yet born. The images showed the final days of the architect civilization. Their numbers dwindling, their worlds growing quiet. The last of them gathered together on their homeworld, not in fear but in peace. They had done what they could. They had cast their message forward through time. Now all they could do was wait and hope. The final image showed the last architect standing alone in a chamber much like this one. The figure was old, tired, but not without hope. It raised one hand in what might have been a gesture of farewell or blessing. Then the image faded to darkness. New images appeared, these ones different in style. They were not recordings, but rather data, information stored in formats that Sarah's mind somehow understood. Technical specifications, scientific principles, philosophical teachings. The architects had left instructions for their children, hoping to guide them away from the mistakes that had doomed their creators. The information was vast, overwhelming. Sarah saw designs for ships that could cross galaxies, power sources that drew energy from the fabric of space itself, medical techniques that could cure diseases that had not yet evolved. She saw mathematics that described dimensions humans had not discovered, art that expressed emotions humans had not named, music that resonated with frequencies beyond human hearing. But woven through all of it was a warning. The architects showed what had killed them, the pride and overconfidence that had led them to tamper with their own genetics in ways they did not fully understand. They had tried to make themselves perfect, to engineer away all weakness and flaw. Instead, they had introduced a flaw so fundamental that it destroyed them. The lesson was clear. Knowledge was a gift, but it came with responsibility. Technology could elevate or destroy. The choice belonged to those who inherited it. Sarah felt Krishna's claw on her shoulder, gentle and grounding. "Are you seeing what I am seeing?" the Vex asked. "Yes," Sarah said. "They left us everything. All their knowledge, all their history. They wanted us to learn from their mistakes. They wanted us to do better than they did." Torvik was staring at the images with all four arms crossed over his chest. "This changes everything," he said. "Humans are not just another species. You are the children of the architects. You are their inheritors. Not just humans," Sarah corrected. "They seeded many worlds. There might be other species out there, species that have not yet developed space travel, that also carry architect genes. We are all their children." A new image appeared, this one showing coordinates in three-dimensional space. It was a map, showing the location of the architect homeworld. The invitation was clear. "Come see where we lived. Come see what we left behind." Sarah memorized the coordinates, feeling the weight of what she had learned settling onto her shoulders. The architects had given humanity and perhaps other species an incredible gift, but they had also given them a responsibility. To do better, to learn from the mistakes of the past, to build something that would last longer than the architects had. "We need to share this," Sarah said. "All of it. Not just with humans, but with the entire galactic community. The architects did not leave this legacy just for us. They left it for anyone wise enough to learn from it." Krishna's three eyes blinked in surprise. "Are you certain? This technology could make humanity the most powerful species in the galaxy. Many would choose to keep it secret." Sarah shook her head. "That is exactly the kind of thinking that destroyed the architects. They hoarded power. They tried to control everything. We have to do better. Besides, if there are other seeded species out there, they deserve to know their heritage too. Torvik rumbled approval. You show wisdom beyond your years, human. The council will be surprised, but I think also pleased. This is how we build a better future. The images began to fade as the archive completed its message. Sarah felt the gentle pull again, this time guiding them toward an exit. Another portal formed in the air, showing the familiar landscape of the research site outside. Before they left, Sarah turned back to look at the chamber one last time. Thank you, she said softly, speaking to the Longdu. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every spacefaring species knew the truth. The architects had not simply disappeared. They had seeded life across the stars and left behind a legacy meant for their children. Humanity was not just another young species stumbling into the galactic community. They were the inheritors of the most advanced civilization that had ever existed. The reaction was mixed. Some species celebrated the discovery and welcomed the sharing of architect knowledge. Others felt threatened or cheated, angry that humans had been given an advantage written into their very genetics. There were protests, debates, even threats of violence from extremist groups who believed the monuments should be destroyed, rather than allowing humans to control them. But Sarah had made her position clear. The architect legacy belonged to everyone. She worked with the council to establish protocols for accessing the monuments. She taught other researchers how to help humans activate the monuments on different worlds. She advocated for the technology to be shared freely, not hoarded or weaponized. It was Ambassador Williams who proposed the expedition. 6 months after Sarah had first activated the monument, the ambassador came to visit the research site personally. She was accompanied by a full diplomatic delegation and a fleet of ships. Dr. Chen, Williams said, shaking Sarah's hand warmly, you have changed the galaxy. Now we need to take the next step. The council has authorized an expedition to the architect homeworld. We need you to lead it. Sarah felt a flutter of excitement and fear in her stomach. Lead it? I am just a linguist. I am not qualified to lead an interstellar expedition. Williams smiled. You are the person who heard the architect's voice when everyone else heard only silence. You are the one they chose to receive their message. If anyone should be the first to walk on their homeworld, it should be you. The expedition was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Ships from 15 different species came together, representing the full diversity of the galactic community. There were human vessels, of course, but also Vex cruisers, Thorum dreadnoughts, Chiron lightships, and representatives from a dozen other civilizations. It was the largest cooperative mission in galactic history. Sarah stood on the bridge of the flagship, a massive human vessel called the Legacy. Beside her stood Kreshna and Torvik, her constant companions throughout this journey. Ambassador Williams was there too, along with Captain Martinez, a veteran of many deep space missions. Coordinates locked in, Martinez said, his fingers moving across the holographic controls. All ships report ready. We can jump whenever you give the word, Dr. Chen. Sarah took a deep breath. The architect homeworld was 3 months away at faster-than-light speeds, assuming the coordinates were accurate. 3 months to think about what they might find. 3 months to prepare for whatever waited at the end. All ships, she said, into the communication system. This is Dr. Sarah Chen. We are about to embark on a journey to honor the memory of those who came before us and to claim the inheritance they left behind. Whatever we find together as equals. Let us go forward with respect, with curiosity and with hope. The ships jumped as one, reality bending around them as they leaped across the light years. Sarah felt the familiar disorientation of FTL travel, the sense of being stretched and compressed simultaneously. Then they were through, hurtling through the void toward a destination that had been waiting for millions of years. The journey was long but not uneventful. Sarah spent her time working with researchers from all the different species, sharing what she knew about architect language and culture. She taught vocal techniques to humans who wanted to learn how to activate the monuments on other worlds. She studied the technical data the architects had left behind, trying to understand the science that had allowed them to seed life across such vast distances. She also thought about what they might find on the homeworld. Would there be more archives? More technology? Or would there be only ruins, the sad remnants of a dead civilization? 3 months after they departed, the fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of a solar system. The star was old, a red giant in the late stages of its life. But in orbit around it were planets, and one of them matched the description from the Architect archives. "There it is," Captain Martinez said quietly. "The Architect homeworld." Sarah stared at the image on the main screen. The planet was beautiful, even from this distance. It had the same blue and green colors as Earth, though the continents were different shapes. White clouds swirled in the atmosphere. It looked alive, welcoming. But as they got closer, the truth became apparent. The planet was not dead, but it was empty. The cities the architects had built still stood, their towers reaching toward the sky. But they were dark and silent, overgrown with plants, reclaimed by nature. There was no sign of technology, no signals, no power readings. The architects were truly gone. The fleet entered orbit and began sending down survey teams. Sarah was on the first shuttle, unable to wait another moment. They landed in what had once been the capital city, in a plaza surrounded by towering buildings that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Stepping out onto architect soil for the first time, Sarah felt tears in her eyes. This was the world her distant ancestors had walked. This was where they had lived and loved and dreamed before the end came. The city was eerily beautiful. The buildings were intact, preserved by the dry climate and the materials the architects had used. Plants grew everywhere, creating a garden from what had once been streets and sidewalks. Small animals moved in the shadows, descendants of the creatures the architects had known. But what struck Sarah most was the silence. This had been a world of voices, of people who communicated through speech and song. Now there was only the wind and the rustle of leaves. Krishna placed a claw on her shoulder. "They are not truly gone," the Vex said gently. "They live on in you, in all the species they seeded." "Their voice continues," Sarah nodded, wiping away tears. They moved deeper into the city, following the coordinates from the archive. They led to a large building at the center of the capital, a structure that looked like a library or museum. Inside, they found what they were looking for. The building was an archive far larger than the one within the monuments. Walls covered in holographic displays, storage devices containing more information than all the current galactic civilizations had collected combined. And in the center, a single monument, identical to the ones they had found on the seeded worlds. Sarah approached it and placed her hand on the surface. Without hesitation, she began to speak the activation phrase. The monument came alive immediately, responding to her voice with enthusiastic light. A hologram appeared above it, life-sized and startlingly real. It showed an architect, the same one from the final image in the other archive, the old one who had stood alone at the end. But now the hologram moved and it spoke. The voice was beautiful, rich and complex, layered with harmonics that made Sarah's heart ache. She could not understand the words, but she felt the meaning behind them. "Welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hearing us." The hologram gestured and the archive came alive around them. Information began flowing, organizing itself into categories that any species could understand. Science, art, history, philosophy, medicine, engineering. Everything the architects had learned in their millions of years of existence, preserved and offered freely. But there was something else too. Personal messages, recordings made by individual architects as their civilization ended. Messages to the children they would never meet, the descendants who would come after. Sarah played one at random. It showed a young architect, not much older than Sarah herself. The being spoke directly to the camera, their voice earnest and full of emotion. Though Sarah could not understand the language, the archive provided a translation that appeared as text. "To whoever finds this," the message said, "to our children across the stars, we are sorry we could not be there to guide you. We are sorry we made mistakes that we could not fix. But we are not sorry we created you. You are our hope, our legacy, our defiance against the darkness. Live well, learn from our failures, build something better than what we built. And remember, when you look up at the stars, that once there were others who looked up with the same wonder, the same curiosity, the same hope. You are not alone. You have never been alone." Sarah was crying openly now, and she did not care who saw. Around her, others were crying too. Krishna, Torvik, even the stoic Captain Martinez had moisture in his eyes. They spent weeks on the architect homeworld, cataloging the archive, exploring the cities, learning everything they could. They found records of the other seeded worlds, dozens of them scattered across the galaxy. Some had developed intelligent life that had not yet reached space. Others had failed, the life dying out before it could evolve. But Earth had succeeded. Humanity had emerged, had grown, had reached for the stars just as the architects had hoped. And now they stood on the homeworld of their distant ancestors, ready to carry the legacy forward. Before they left, Sarah gathered the representatives from all the species together in the central plaza. The monument stood behind her, gleaming in the yellow,